Kramer here. This video is unofficially sponsored by Mint Mobile. Get more with Mint. If you pay in bulk, the more you save. With plans such as 3 months, 6 months, and the yearly plan, you'll save more with Mint Mobile. And if you use this promo code fbuy.me/R2DMR, you'll get a discount. So go with Mint and give it a try. Premium wireless at cut rates. All right, today this is going to be my first video. I'm not really going to go full-fledged into the editing or anything, nothing fancy, no bells and whistles. The first topic I'm going to talk about is the Bills. Are the Bills going to make the Super Bowl? Will they be the first seed in the AFC and get those great buys so they only have to play one game and get the home field advantage all the way through the playoffs? Who knows? It all depends on if they can win their next few games against the Bengals and the Patriots. In my opinion, I think they may have a hard time against the Bengals. The Bengals are sort of an interesting team. They're kind of, how can I say, the late bloomers in the AFC. They, um, they have a great quarterback by the name of Joe Burrow, and they have Chase as the wide receiver, and it's going to be, well, probably one of the best games of the season, I predict. Very high scoring, down to the wire, and I hope the Bills will do it. And I think that they will pull it off, but I think it's going to be a very, very contested game, very close game. I'm not sure who's really favored for the game. I didn't see the line or anything like that. What the line was, but I think I'm sure the Bills are probably favored by 3 points. But I would say that the Bills are going to pull it off. They're going to win, and I'm going to predict the score will be 37 to 30. I Maybe 37 to 32, and it's going to be a great game. And look for Josh Allen to throw for over 300 yards and Joe Burrow as well. There's going to be a great game by Devin Singletary. He will rush for 100 yards. So it's going to be a wonderful game. Everybody's going to do great in this game. Great. Look for some great play by the defense as well, by Ed Oliver and Greg Rousseau. And really looking forward to that game if I have the chance to see it. All right, what I like to talk about now is I'm sure everybody has problems with this through the years as they approach middle-agedom. It's problems with the family and the in-laws. I'm sure everybody's been through this, and I'm not alone. And I guess people are out there, they're playing the world's smallest violin for me because I'm sure it's quite common. It's nothing new, and it's like why should everybody feel sorry for me when it's probably when the guy next door is probably going through the same things I'm going through. That is, if he's around the same age as I am. Yeah, well, my mother died a few months ago, back in back in July, and ever since then. Uh, well, even before then, it's been really, really hard dealing with my in-laws, uh, and my oldest sister's brother-in-law specifically, and not to mention my sister. So yeah, it was been very hard. As my mother was, you know, not doing well. She was suffering from Alzheimer's disease or Alzheimer's slash dementia for at least the past 10 years. And it was a big ordeal for all of us. And when I went away, I was overseas for quite some time, working, and I wanted to come back, and maybe I wanted to help out and so forth, but to no avail. It wasn't really appreciated, uh, and it was absolutely horrible. Long story short, uh, a lot of my family, like my sister and her brother-in-law, her husband, my brother-in-law, would go into the house, my mother's house, and I was living there sporadically, and would go into the house. They'd have the key. They would have the key, but I would not have the key for some reason, for some strange reason. And they would just go and they'd store things in the house, in my mother's house, and they could take whatever they wanted. It was anything they wanted. It was theirs to be taken. And I one time I noticed my one of my things was I had like a it was like an ice cream freezer, and I noticed that I saw the ice cream freezer, that the part that you put into the refrigerator to freeze, or the freezer to freeze, and but what was missing was the other part, the outer part, which would rotate, would churn the ice cream. And then what I noticed, I don't know what happened to it, and then I sort of put two and two together when basically my brother-in-law was coming up from the basement, and when he came up from the basement, he was holding none other than the round, sort of, I guess you could say, sort of a cylinder, about 2.5 quart size of the ice cream freezer. And while he was coming upstairs, he didn't like ask, "Oh, who is this? Do you need this?" He never asked if anybody needed it or he could take it. He just said, "I need this," and then proceeded to leave the house and take it home, and I don't know, and use it alongside the other part that I couldn't find. I would assume. So anyway, it was a weird coincidence. It's right around the same time, uh, concurrently, I believe. Uh, My mother claimed that her jewelry was missing, and she accused my sister of taking the jewelry. But I didn't witness that, so I don't know what happened to the that jewelry. So I wasn't sure. But what I was sure about is that my brother-in-law was going in to the house and just taking things without asking. So anyway, I think it may have been a couple months that elapsed since that incident, and my mother called the police regarding my sister, and and uh, and I was calling regarding him taking the freezer or canister or whatever you call it out of the basement, and nobody was sure what happened. I assumed my maybe my sister stole this jewelry. I wasn't sure, yeah, but it wasn't. But then what happened was later on. I guess I assumed that my mother found the jewelry, and I wasn't sure. But I didn't know. But meantime, I didn't know what happened to the ice cream freezer. So anyway, I guess it was maybe I don't know the actual sequence of events actually how it was, but I remember there was a time right around that time I went over. My mother was complaining that they were storing there were items into the my mother's house and so forth, and she wanted it out because they already had their own home, so they had enough room to fit whatever they needed, whatever they had enough room to fit whatever they needed in my mother's house that was stored in my mother's house. They to fit in their house. It's a big area, and they could most likely put it in the basement or whatever. But so what happened was, I remember my sister had like maybe like some type of a table set or something like that. It was a wood table, it was like a patio table set, if I'm not mistaken. And my mother was telling me that she wanted to sell it, and so I wanted to maybe help my mother out and maybe post it on Craigslist or maybe Facebook Marketplace to sell the item. So beforehand, to verify, I called my sister on the phone to ask if it was all right to sell. So I said, "Oh, hello, Julie. How are you? You have this table set, this table set in here, and would you like to sell it?" So then my sister responds, "No, no, 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 don't leave it alone, leave it alone," as usual, right? Because it seemed like whenever I got involved in something, she never really wanted. Well, that pretty much summed up. She doesn't want me to get involved in her things. So anyway, I understood what was going on then, and it was clear to me where I stood with my sister and my brother-in-law and whatever. So I think maybe around that time my mother was getting a little frustrated with my brother-in-law and my sister. So I decided to take some items in the car and return it over to the rightful place, their house. So, and I don't, I didn't, it wasn't a big deal to me. I don't see why it was a big deal to them. So I went over there and with my mother, and I took some of the stuff out of the car and I placed it maybe on the walkway to the front door, or maybe on the driveway. Some of the things, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, but what happened was when I went to the door, my brother-in-law was there on the front door, and he was saying something like, "Whoa, what are you doing? What are we doing? What are you doing here and whatever? Your house is a piece of shit, and your house is a piece of shit, and I don't want to bother with you." And then he's basically, he laid his cards out on the table regarding me. He said, "I don't like you. I'm going to call the police and have you arrested for trespassing." When my mother could just, I guess you could say conversely, uh, could just call the police on them for coming in and stealing items, regularly stealing items from the house. So I got a little, I got a little frustrated. It was the very first time he shared his true feelings about me. So yeah, it was been very hard. As my mother was, you know, not doing well. She was suffering from Alzheimer's disease, or Alzheimer's slash dementia, for at least the past 10 years. And it was a big ordeal for all of us. And when I went away, I was overseas for quite some time, working, and I wanted to come back, and maybe I wanted to help out and so forth, but to no avail. It wasn't really appreciated, uh, and it was absolutely horrible. Uh, Long story short, uh, a lot of my family, like my sister and her brother-in-law, her husband, my brother-in-law, would go into the house, my mother's house, and I was living there sporadically, and would go into the house. They'd have the key. They would have the key, but I would not have the key for some reason, for some strange reason. And they would just go and they would store things in the house, in my mother's house, and they could take whatever they wanted. It was anything they wanted. It was theirs to be taken. And I one time I noticed my one of my things was I had like a it was like an ice cream freezer, and I noticed that I saw the ice cream freezer, that the part that you put into the refrigerator to freeze, or the freezer to freeze, and but what was missing was the other part, the outer part, which would spin, would rotate, would churn the ice cream. And then what I noticed, I don't know what happened to it, and then I sort of put two and two together when basically my brother-in-law was coming up from the basement, and when he came up from the basement, he was holding none other than the round, sort of, I guess you could say, sort of a cylinder, uh, about 2.5 quart size of the ice cream freezer. And while he was coming upstairs, he didn't like ask, "Oh, who is this? Do you need this?" He never asked if anybody needed it or he could take it. He just said, "I need this," and then proceeded to leave the house and take it home, and I don't know, and use it alongside the other part that I couldn't find, I would assume. So anyway, it was a weird coincidence. It's right around the same time, uh, concurrently, I believe. Uh, My mother claimed that her jewelry was missing, and she accused my sister of taking the jewelry, but regarding him taking the freezer or canister or whatever you call it out of the basement. And nobody was sure what happened. I assumed, my maybe my sister stole this jewelry. I wasn't sure. Yeah, but it wasn't. But then what happened was later on, I guess I assumed that my mother found the jewelry, and I wasn't sure. But I didn't know. But meantime, I didn't know what happened to the ice cream freezer. So anyway, I guess it was maybe, I don't know I don't know the actual sequence of events, actually, how it was, but I remember there was a time right around that time I went over. My mother was complaining that they were storing there were items into the my mother's house and so forth, and So I wanted to maybe help my mother out and maybe post it on Craigslist or maybe Facebook Marketplace to sell the item. And then he kind of was giving my saying, claiming that, oh, I love you to my mother and giving her a hug and a kiss, and which I couldn't understand, because he was just being very rude and very inconsiderate. And from that time, I really left a bad taste in my mouth regarding my brother-in-law. My opinion about my oldest sister was pretty much the same ever for as long as I can remember. But my brother-in-law, not so much. But now, it's like I have the same opinion of my brother-in-law as I do as my sister now, ever since then. And and I think it was after that happened, is then I actually called the police a few months later regarding some stolen things or missing things in the house. And I think I maybe drew attention to the police that they would constantly come in my mother's house and take what they want and keep what they wanted in her house and not move it over to their house. And it's very frustrating to me. And I remember uh, one time my mother, she had a hard time driving for a long time. She used to just getting out of the driveway, she would get into an accident. Like when my car was parked slightly behind her, to the side. She would still somehow manage to strike my car, and I think she struck two of my cars that I owned, and it was a bit frustrating. And sometimes I didn't really respond well to that. And I remember the first time she did it, she started screaming at me about the car, about parking my car where it was parked, and it was very frustrating because I didn't necessarily believe it was my fault per se, but it was really bad. But then I could recall maybe many months later, uh, or maybe many months later, or maybe a couple of years later, as her dementia or Alzheimer's, progressed, things got even worse. I could recall while she was trying to leave the neighborhood, there was like this partition between the left side and the right side of the road, and instead of going into the right side of the partition, she went to the left side. So she was driving on the wrong side of the road, in other words. So as I mean, I was walking I saw her. She was driving on the wrong side, and there was an oncoming car coming in, and fortunately, the oncoming car was going slow and well below the speed limit. So then she realized, whoa, I'm going on the wrong side of the road. But then I think what happened was the car that was coming yield the way, and she was able to get through the partition over to the and turn into the right side of the road, fortunately enough. But I noticed this a lot, and she would regularly call me about how to get to. She'd call me over the phone on how to get to like a supermarket that was maybe no more than 2 miles away, and I had to explain it to her on the phone. I even went so far as to get her a one of those with like a GPS, like those GPS systems, like a Garmin or like what was it called? Yeah, a TomTom, and one of those global positioning systems, like navigation. And I showed her several times, and she still couldn't. As many times I've showed her, she still couldn't figure it out. I got her the TomTom, and then finally the TomTom, I got her like the Garmin, and no matter how hard I tried, she couldn't figure out how to use it. Uh, and it was really, 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 really rough. I mean, I wasn't the best son, but I think it was a bit ridiculous, how I was treated by my mother and my all my siblings. So anyway, it just got really bad. It went, I regularly get phone calls from the police and stating like asking if it was all right for her to drive, and I don't know if my sisters were aware of it. I don't, nor did they care because I even remember while I was in Korea, I was looking at maybe my sister or my brother-in-law's Facebook page, and it had a picture of my mother wearing a neck brace. So obviously she was involved in an accident. It wasn't that I'm sure it wasn't necessarily her fault, but I'm sure she was driving so slow on the road because she no longer had like peripheral vision anymore. She could only when she was driving, she could only concentrate on things ahead of her and not anything into her peripheral. And 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 I remember one time, uh, when I returned from Asia, she I was in the she was in the kitchen and I was in the it was like a sort of a higher level. I was in the living room and I was standing at like about 10 feet away for her, a little bit to the side, about maybe 30 degrees 30 degrees from the side. And I remember she was yelling my name. She was calling my name. I was maybe ten feet away, a little bit like 30 degrees in the peripheral. And she was yelling my name multiple times. Daryl, Daryl. And I'm saying, I'm here. I'm here. And, she was hearing impaired as well. She's been hearing impaired she was hearing impaired for most of her life, actually. And I was yelling, I'm here, here, mom, I'm here, mom. And while there was some man that was doing like service on the phone or something like that, he was a bit taken aback about all this stuff because he's kind of like it kind of disturbed him a little bit, and um and I remember I was saying I'm here, and then the 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 repairman was like very was a bit nervous and stuff, and it's a bit felt a little bit felt awkward for him, and he said he wanted to get out of there. He was saying I want to get out of here. This is crazy, and then. While this was going on, he left, but it was just a really awkward situation, and and it was sad because I don't think she should have been driving, and it was very apparent to a lot of people that knew her that she had lots of problems. One time, like the police came over to talk to her, and they were asking her how to get to the doctor's office, and she just basically said, "It's behind the Wegmans," which was like a local, Rochester-based grocery store. Not necessarily local, but Rochester-based grocery store. So that's all. That was only her point of reference she knew, and she couldn't really explain how to get there. But then the police would ask her like who the president of the United States was, and what day of the week it was, and she couldn't really answer any of these questions. She was very close by with one question she asked when the president, she said it was Trump, but that wasn't entirely true because at that time he was the elected president elect, but wasn't sworn in. But that was like a technicality which maybe she wasn't aware of. But she and everybody seemed to know what was going on with her. But then somehow somehow I don't know what happened, but the police, I guess after the police seen her on the road, and after because they made several phone calls to me and everything. After the police had seen her on the road, I guess I don't know what she was doing. They decided they gave her a date to do a retest. And then when they did the retest, I helped, I arranged to get her a driving instructor to prepare for the test and so forth. And the driver, when I talked to the driving instructor, he was telling me like, oh, yeah, she'll be all right or whatever. But then when the time the test come, I spoke to the instructor and he says, "Oh, she had a hard time. She turned the engine on. She turned the ignition twice while the engine was running, and this and that, and then that was it." So, long story short, was she the the test ended quite abruptly, and her excuse her excuse for not doing well in the test was the the people that were giving the test were fat. So when the time came, we went to the court, and I wasn't certain what was in store for what would happen. We went to the family court, Erie County Family Court, next time for the Buffalo area. So we went there, and she went there. My sister was there, her brother-in-law, and there was a lawyer as well. So when the lawyer was there, stated that that the petition against my sister was incorrect because it had somebody else's handwriting on it. It was my handwriting, which was my mistake. But I think my mother planned that. That's what she didn't want. She was a lot sharper than people thought. So anyway, when after we left the courtroom, the my mother was claiming that my sister was a monster and this and that. She was a horrible. And then the lawyer approached me and says, "Oh," and asked if my mother was okay and everything, and like she was concerned for my mother. And then the judge then, no, not the judge, the lawyer then approached the one of the wardens there, I guess to look after her and I, because I claim, I guess, I don't know, to show that maybe I'm dangerous or something like that. I'm dangerous or something like that. And while we were going down the stairs, there was the warden was there to look after to watch us and like listen into what we were saying or something like that. And then we went down, and then when the for the time came for the next court date, my mother didn't want to go, which was very strange. So my sister was in another city in New Jersey, then was asking what was going on. Like she was unbiased and she was impartial, and she didn't wasn't communicating with my sister or my brother-in-law. Like she's trying to play like, oh, she's trying to play like neutral person. Uh, like very neutral. So I was talking about what happened in the court and everything, and like how what my mother called my sister a monster and this and that, and like, and she's just like, oh, I don't know, I don't have a clue what's going on. I mean, this is the first time I've heard of this, heard from this, what's going on with the court and everything. Then then when I also told her that, oh, my mother wasn't continuing on with this and so forth. She was saying, oh, she's no, she wasn't saying, but she texted me through Facebook Messenger, that she's she she's wasting other people's time. She's terrible. She's wasting people's time and this and that. She's really horrible and this and that. But then I didn't understand where my sister was coming from, why she'd be frustrated about that. But then when I started talking about things, wanted to know about what happened and whatnot, then I found out that that lawyer that my sister had that appeared in court with them was was paid in full. I'm sure yeah, paid in full the, by my youngest sister that I was talking to from New Jersey. So I was a bit frustrated because she's very sneaky, she's very underhanded, and then I was very frustrated, and it's like no wonder why she was very angry, about that. Because if she didn't pay for the lawyer, I don't think she'd give a crap, about wasting people's time. I don't think she could care less about it. So I found out, and then I was very that really got to me, like it's like she was trying, then like she was trying to be like she was very unbiased and so forth. But she was taking my sister's side, and she was in sister and my brother-in-law's side behind my back, and I was very, very, very yeah, that kind of got yeah, that I was very disheartened by that. And and then later on, my youngest sister, I remember I didn't know where my mother was. I was very concerned about her, so I kept texting her, but she wasn't responding because my sister, my mother claimed that my sister was being very abusive in the way that my brother-in-law was acting was very rude. Uh, so anyway, I was texting her. I didn't know where she was, so I texted my sister, who had the power of attorney over my mother, and I asked, "Where's mom? Where's mom? Do you know where she's?" Oh, check with check with this person, check with that person, and and I assumed my miss sister was in New Jersey, but sometimes my mother texts, or not text, she didn't know how to text, but she calls on my mother, like she calls my mother to check on her, and they correspond with each other. So I didn't know what was going on, and I was very concerned. And then, long story short, a couple hours later, I get a call through the Yahoo Messenger. Oh, Daryl, did you take mom to the hospital? She broke her hip. And I was like, whoa, she broke her hip. And I was like so concerned. So I went over to my mother's house. I rang the doorbell. The door was locked. I couldn't get in, and I didn't know what the hell was going on. I didn't have a clue. And then, assuming that my sister was in New Jersey, and maybe I don't know, my mother called her, because due to the emergency. So then I'm ringing the doorbell multiple times, and then a vehicle pulls up behind my car in the driveway, and I see it's it's none other than my older sister, which I expected to see, my mother and my mother, but I also saw my sister, who I assumed was in New Jersey. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, and my mother's getting on the car, and they're carrying her. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh, and I wanted to take her in the car, and then all of a sudden I realized that my car wasn't starting, and then I got frustrated and I clapped my hand, and what happened was my sister, because because they that loud clap, she sort of made it as though I was. striking somebody or hitting somebody, my youngest or my oldest sister. And so my sister yells, "Don't hit people, Daryl! Don't hit people! It's not nice to hit people." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh!" And I didn't know what's happened. Well, I don't know what was happening. It was very strange. So my car wasn't starting. So I guess the reason they called me is because my sister, my youngest sister, was late for her flight or something like that. So they drove her to the hospital, nearby hospital, and she was taken care of. She was in the hospital for like a day or two, and then and I don't know why it was what was happening, why they didn't contact me, they were keeping secrets from me, and that's what I have to contend with, you know. And now my mother died. I I had a hard time. My sister texted me to come and see her, but with all that, the way I'm treated, why would I want to do that if I had to encounter my oldest sister? And I'm sure you've heard this story before, and and this is nothing new, but I don't know. I just want to vent with people and share with other people what's going on. And now, you know, I I'm my mother when we were discussing about who would get what, and I would get the car, and the car is now registered in my name. My sister went to the surrogate's court to approve it. I decided, you know, instead of to call my brother-in-law directly because of all the problems I've been having with him, I decided to call the police instead to contact him. So I was there, and then finally I waited about 20 minutes for the police to arrive, and I started talking to the police. Could you call my? They called to call my brother-in-law to come over and open the garage so I can take the car. So that was met with a lot of, I guess, disagreement or whatever, or a lot of maybe passive aggressive behavior or something from my brother-in-law. You know, first they said that when I talked to the police, they knew what was going on. I because I called earlier on to the police department, they said that I have to be there before they could do anything, and the police they knew about the situation, and the policeman said, "Oh, he's out of town. He's out of town." So they called him and again, and then they talked to him. They finally got on the phone. Yeah, he's in town. So I don't know what was happening. Maybe he was lying before. So what happened was I didn't know what was going on, but there was two police officers and there was another policeman I was communicating and talking about the problems I'm having with my in-laws and my sister and everything. And basically, while I was discussing that with him, I believe I would assume my brother-in-law was saying something to the effect of, "Oh, he's not capable of driving. He's not mentally able to drive," and he wanted them to call crisis services or something like that because I'm not mentally able to drive or something like that. And then basically, long story short, he said that he was with kids and he couldn't make it. And but if I want to open the garage, I have to talk to him directly. So then the policeman said, "Oh, um, policeman said, oh, you got to talk to him directly." Long story short, talk to him directly. It's like, okay, thank you. So I just turned away. I turned away from the police and walked back to where I was staying, and that was that. So this is a huge ordeal that I have to deal with all the time, and I don't know. It's quite sad, and I hope I can get through it. And I don't know how to proceed, how to take action. I've called several attorneys, but it doesn't seem like they're willing to do anything like on contingency. Um, because I think I could get money. There could be some money in it for me or something like that. And I've talked to many lawyers, and they charge like an arm and a leg, and I don't know. And some never even got back to me. So I hope things things end well for me and everybody else, and everything's done fairly and squarely. But anyway, once again, thank you very much for your time, and hopefully I can change the topic to something else that's a lot more interesting. But if you have any suggestions for me, I'd really really appreciate it. But what I suggest for you, if you want to save money on your cell phone bill, I suggest Mint Mobile, and just use this link, which is http colon double slash fbuy.me slash r2 DMR, and save money on your mobile phone bill. Mint Mobile. Pay in advance. The more you pay in advance, the more you save with Mint Mobile. Until next time, goodbye, everybody.